Hi everyone, this is Pranjal, and today I'm going to be speaking about overcoming child abuse with Lawrence, a 19-year-old youth empowerment speaker who supports teens and young adults in building resilience, self-love, and strong mindsets. Lawrence, before we get into today's episode, would you like to tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I often say that the person you see today is someone who I had to build up. Because picture this: you're 12 years old, and one moment you're working on a school project on your phone, and the next, your dad blacks your eye. And you don't know what's going on. Your little sister comes running downstairs because she hears you screaming. The whole house just erupts into chaos. And in that moment, you feel alone. It's as if the entire world had just fallen apart. And because my mom and dad are separate, my mom wasn't physically there to do anything. I would go to her house some days, and I'd go to his house. And the custody system, they make it very complicated for cases like mine. So for the next 3 years, I've had to figure out what it means to be a man without being able to trust him. Had to get myself and my siblings out of that house, and had to figure out what it means to be a child again. It's through that pain I started to realize that I can find a way out of this. Things like therapy, journaling, a lot of things we're going to get into. But through all of the ups and downs, I had some good times, had some bad times. I've gotten on YouTube, began inspiring people, making videos about my life, and hey guys, here's how we can build a better mindset. Even when I myself was struggling, I knew that I might have only been one step in front of the person watching, but if they could understand that they're not alone, I did my job. That 15-year-old Lawrence just doing his job to try and help the 12-year-old Lawrence has now turned into the 19-year-old Lawrence who does this as a career.
Wow, that's amazing. Are you the oldest?
Yeah, at the time I was 12, my little sister was 9, and my little brother was 7.
Was the majority of the abuse directed towards you, or were your siblings also enduring similar things?
They were too, but the majority was directed at me in major part because I would always try to direct it at myself. I knew that I hated it, but I didn't want them to feel it to the same degree that I did.
I'm sure your siblings really appreciate everything you did for them, as do all your listeners on YouTube and everyone you were mentioning who's gone through something similar and can look to you for the next step.
I will say this: during that period of my life, I was also very hard to be around because when you box off all your emotions and bottle everything up and try to protect everyone else, it's a very noble, important thing, but it comes at the cost of you kind of start to drive yourself crazy because you sit up panicking, worried about everything. It is going to be the day when everything falls apart. And then you're trying to manage school, friendships, then you're trying to manage your family, then you're trying to manage puberty, then you're trying to manage relationships. It's like you're an octopus trying to handle the complexities of your own mind while also making enough time to be with yourself, but you can't because you're always worried about everyone outside of you. And because you don't have a good connection with yourself, you don't know how to connect with other people.
Is it even possible for someone who's enduring child abuse to create that kind of connection with themselves, or do you think that's something that can only be done once they're out of the abusive situation?
It's possible. It's definitely possible. It's just very hard to do because the way I was able to pull it off was and your imagination. It's going to sound a bit silly, but it works. The reality right in front of you is your dad is beating with you. Maybe it's your mom. Maybe it's an aunt or uncle or any kind of situation. You have a bad thing happening in front of you. You might not even be experiencing the abuse. You might see your parent experiencing the abuse. This is what you see in front of you. But in your head, you have to imagine a world that is better. You have to think, okay, this right here in front of me, I don't like this, but I like this in here. And every time you are feeling really worn down, you just close your eyes, take a deep breath, and think, it's all going to get better somehow, some way. And getting a journal. Every podcast I go on, I always tell people, get a journal and write in it every day. Because the more you write in your journal, the more you'll understand yourself and the more you'll be able to connect both with the good and with the bad about yourself. Have you ever heard of Carl Jung?
Sounds familiar.
He was the guy who came up with the concept of your shadow. So we all have things that we show the world. Maybe it's the way we dress or art, the thing we want people to see, the stuff we want them to know. Then we have our shadow, which is the stuff we don't show people. It could be you have a bad temper, you're impatient, you're insecure about showing people your art because you don't think it's good enough. That's the stuff you don't want to show the world. In order to have a good connection with yourself, you have to connect both with the good and with the stuff you don't want people to know. If you have these darker traits, and I say darker not in a bad way, but just in you don't show it to people, you don't tell them. It's like you're only connected halfway. You have to take the good and the bad and bring them together to become whole again. It's a hard process, but journaling makes it easier.
Is there anything other than journaling you would recommend to anyone going through a tough time?
Yes. So firstly, journaling, exercise, if possible, therapy. That worked for me. Another one, get some hobbies. Go outside. It seems simple, but if you box yourself into a room and it's dark in there and it's cold and messy, it's going to make it feel worse. If you go outside for 5 minutes and just walk around and go, oh, the birds are chirping, the grass is green, you become grateful for the simplest things. And when you can find gratitude in breathing, in the fact you're not blind, it makes life a bit more tolerable. You might still have that problem. You might still feel really upset or stressed out or nervous, but you realize it's a little bit less bad, at least.
Yeah, I love that. That's something I do a lot because sometimes I get really anxious about the future and I love just going outside, like even for 5 minutes, like you said, and feeling like, okay, even if I'm right and all these worst case scenarios happen and I don't get most of the things I want in life, the chances are like I'm always going to have access to like the sky above me, the ground below me. I can walk, I have a healthy body. And that's something to be really grateful for. And that's not something everybody has. There are a lot of people in other parts of the world and even in the US who don't have that kind of freedom, who don't have access to clean air and green spaces. So if you're listening to this and you do, I really encourage everyone to take some time to enjoy that.
Yes. Something you mentioned on the note of having access to the sky and the ground and water. It reminded me of, so there was an organization I spoke at back in December. These were mainly young adults who ended up having gun charges. Non-violent charges, though. They grew up in a bad environment and illegally got a gun to protect themselves. Not to hurt anyone, just to protect themselves. And they were mentioning to me about how it's really hard for them to go and get jobs because you have this charge. Most of them got it removed because they went through a program that allowed them to do that. But after I was talking to them and they were describing to me their upbringing, I asked them, raise your hand if you have clean running water. Keep it up if you have electricity. Keep it up if you have food in your refrigerator. Not necessarily steaks and lobster, just food inside of a working refrigerator, and your household makes more than $30,000 a year combined. And they all kept their hands up. And then I let them know that that puts you in the top 5% of the world. Running water, a refrigerator, electricity, food, and more than $30,000 a year puts you in the top 10% of the world. So, what I would often do is remind yourself to be grateful of the simplest thing.
And I will say it's really hard if you're also struggling with a mental illness like depression to be told to be grateful for, a roof over your head and food over on the table. It can also be really hard to have the motivation to do even simple things like journaling or stepping outside because the nature of the disease can crush your motivation to even want to get better. I wish there was an easy solution for that. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts.
There really isn't much of a easy solution to that. Because just a little bit of context to people listening. I'm saying this as somebody who, one, was diagnosed at 13 with complex PTSD. So I had to literally figure out how to rewire my brain to stop panicking all the time. And someone who has autism. So when you put those two together, it's a really weird mix. And the thing that I found on the day when I felt super unmotivated, like dirty room, barely brushing my teeth, didn't have a haircut in like a year, I was really at the bottom. What I found is that either you have to force yourself to do the simple thing. Like, make the bar to success ridiculously low. If I can stand out of bed, that's a win. I got out of bed. I didn't go anywhere yet. I just stood up and got out of bed. I won. That simple. And you get that little hit of guilt, like, wow, I did something. I didn't clean the room yet. I did something. Pick up one piece of trash and put it into the can. You had not cleaned your entire room. You picked up one piece of trash, but you did something. You become so sick and tired of being sick and tired that through absolute desperation, you end up getting better. Because you're like, this sucks so much that I am going to brute force my way out of this problem. That's one that looks a bit unhealthy in the process because it's very messy and complex. But I have found, at least in my experience, that's what got me out of it. I got to a point where I was so sick and tired of laying in bed all day and being on my phone scrolling on Instagram for 12 hours and distracting myself. I got so sick and tired of it that I said, I'm figuring something out. That's where I became more obsessed with finding ways to get better. And the one that worked when nothing else did, make the bar ridiculously low. If you stand out of bed, you got out of bed. Make it that easy.
I think that's a great tip, especially because for most things, I find that the hardest thing to do is just to start. Getting out of bed is often harder than cleaning your room. Getting the motivation to go outside for 5 minutes can sometimes feel as difficult as 30 minutes. Once you get the ball rolling, it'll be much easier. If we psych ourselves out by thinking, if I work out, it has to be for an hour. if I go to school, then I have to get an A on all my exams. If we psych ourselves out by setting the bar too high, then we never take that first step to begin with.
And once you get the ball rolling, the ball just will keep rolling.
What advice would you give to people who know a friend or loved one is undergoing some kind of abuse?
That's an interesting question because my first instinct is that you want to speak to that person, and if they're in a dire mental health situation, let them know that crisis centers are available. It may seem extreme to go immediately to that, but if that's where their mind state is at, they need to be supervised and have somebody make sure they don't hurt themselves or anyone else. You also can make a report on that. Your friend or family member might feel upset if you tell the cops their business, or tell a counselor their business, or tell a parent or somebody who is able to help them their business. They might be upset as to why are you telling people what I'm going through. They're going to be upset about it for a little while, but eventually they'll come to realize that you did that because you care. Letting them know help is available, as well as taking steps to help them get out of that situation.
I think my greatest fear, if I were in that position, would be that I tell someone what's going on and their abuser finds out. The person I told is unable to help, and suddenly the abuse is significantly worse.
That is a very tricky situation.
It's a reflection of improvements that need to be done to the system in general, and how fast and how efficient we are to responding to people, especially children, in situations of maltreatment.
Because I have seen situations where people's abuser does find out. It's a thing where you can order a pizza from the cops. That's like a code for them to know that you're getting abused. No to pizza.
Yeah.
That's something where an abuser could hear that through the walls or something, and but I would definitely say if you intend to help your friend speak to a law enforcement officer or a counselor, it would be good for you and that friend to have a conversation about this before taking that step. Because your friend might be caught off guard if all of a sudden they get called into the counselor's office. But if you let them know that, hey, me as the friend, I want help, I'm just afraid to go to the counselor and say what's going on, do you mind telling them for me? Maybe that's one way you can do it. Because if the situation is absolutely emergency, like it is dire, people are throwing stuff at them in the house, there's a lot of danger going on, then that's when you can directly say to somebody, hey, they need to be out of this situation. That's a complex question because there's so many layers to it.
And it's so specific to everyone's situation, it's hard to give generalized advice.
Because all forms of abuse are valid, but when it comes to getting legal systems involved, it is different. It is classified as a form of verbal abuse, but it is treated differently than physical or sexual abuse.
With domestic violence, we're taught when helping people to be very survivor centered, have faith that person knows what's best for them, and to try your best to avoid removing autonomy by making decisions for them. Of course, in some situations, if you are genuinely afraid that they might become seriously injured or lose their life, then in those situations, it's okay to make the decision. But in general, I think it's really important that we are communicating with the person who's actually in the situation and just helping them do what they think will help them, not what you think is going to help them. Because at the end of the day, no one understands their situation like they do.
Yeah. And you just brought up a great point there.
A lot of people who get into abusive relationships endured childhood abuse. A lot of kids who are being abused when they're younger feel that this is the norm. This is the norm in the region where I live, or this is the norm in my culture, and this is okay.
Yeah. Another thing too is that when you mentioned it being the norm, it reminds me of how we can know something is bad for us. We can be fully aware and fully conscious this thing or this person or this kind of relationship is bad for me, but it's familiar. I know what this is. I recognize this. So when people don't heal from that childhood abuse, what they saw growing up, they will tend to gravitate towards, oh, mom and dad used to yell at each other. I know it's bad, but it's familiar. And without knowing it, you will remove the people who are good for you, and you'll only go towards those who are bad for you because that's what you're familiar with. It's not that everybody is bad and evil and cheating and doing all these things. No. That's something in us that's causing us to select these people. Whenever you're having the same problem over and over, whether it be a relationship problem, a financial problem, an emotion, a bad habit, anything that is bad for you, you know it's bad for you and you want to stop. You have to be honest with yourself and go, why do I keep doing this? What about the kind of music I'm listening to, or the kind of entertainment, or the people I'm around? What is it in me that is leading to this external outcome? Once you change the internal, you can change the external.
So, to take a more specific example for that, how can someone who, let's say they're 19 and they're not at home anymore, but for most of their life when they were at home, they witnessed terrible abuse, how can they avoid replicating that same dynamic in their future house with their future partner or kids?
You got to be aware of it, because once you're aware that, okay, this is what I saw growing up, I don't want to do that. Now you have the awareness. Then you have to go inside and dig into it. You have to start to notice how this affects different areas of your life. Every single person, every single place you go, thing that you do, and your thoughts, and the fact of what they're rooted in. It's a lot to explain, but the simple I can put it is your mind is like a giant computer, and everything that you've experienced has put a line of code in there. If you want to change the outcome, you have to change the code that you're running. That may mean you need to stop watching entertainment that has bad relationships in it. You have to start watching happy marriage movies. You have to start hanging around people who have happy, loving relationships. You have to start listening to happy love songs. Because, as we often say, people tend to be a product of their environment. If you want to shift the outcome, you can start to shift the environment and put yourself around, and slowly but surely, you will notice changes.
Yeah, that's a great point. Even if you're not able to control certain aspects of your environment, or maybe in certain situations you don't want to, like all your friends are going to see a movie that centers around childhood abuse. Sometimes it's good to take some time to think about it, verbalize, discuss with those close to you what aspects you liked and what aspects you didn't like. Like, I like how this person in the movie did this, but I don't like how they did this. This is something I would never tolerate. This is something I would never do. And know in your mind, you know, what your boundaries are, what your expectations are from others and from yourself. Once you identify what values are important for you, it becomes much easier to recognize anything that doesn't align with your values and change it.
You're also allowed to simply say no. No is the full sentence. Because if, let's say you just don't want to go see the movie, you're like, okay, I'm changing what I'm watching, I'm changing what I'm around. You guys can go watch that. You guys can go to the party, do whatever the thing is. But no, I'm not doing that. I've never been an addict, but something I've often heard from people who were is that you just have to stop going to the places where you did the addiction by all means necessary. If you completely want to make this radical shift in the way you view life, in your habits, you want to go from A to B. You cannot bring A into B. You have to decide. And when you start to say no to things, it builds up your priority list. You say, no, I'm not going to a bar. No, I'm not going to this place that I want to leave. No, I'm not doing something that goes against my morals and my character just because it might be fun. If you decide you want to still go watch the movie, you're allowed to do that. But you're also allowed to tell people no.
It's interesting that you brought up how being in certain places where you did behavior that you want to change can trigger you to fall into the same patterns of behavior. It reminds me of something called state dependent memory, where like we tend to whenever you go to a place, you tend to remember things that happened at other times you were in the place, and that can cause you to fall into the same patterns of behavior. Even harmless things like college kids going back home for winter break, and suddenly you feel yourself reverting back to your high school self, getting back into the same unhealthy habits. And I guess one approach to that would be avoid the place. But if that's not possible, even being aware of this and consciously trying your best within that place to do things differently than how you did it last time can be really helpful. For the people listening to this episode today who are experiencing childhood abuse, what advice would you give them?
I would say, as cliche as this advice sounds, it's coming from somebody who's done it. It will get better if you give yourself the opportunity for it to get better. Because it's really easy to quit and say that I'm just stuck here and this is going to be the rest of my life forever and ever. And if you're 5 years old or 10 or 12, I know it feels 18 years old where you can legally move out is forever away. But the time will go by. As long as you remember, there's someone out there who cares. There's some way out. And that way out is not hurting yourself. If you give up, you'll never get to realize what life can be. That might mean looking into moving into a different family member's house. Worst case scenario, shelters are an option. As well as, again, journaling, creating that mental picture in your head, and remind yourself every day, where I am does not have to be where I stay. Not physically where you stay, but mentally. Just because my current circumstances are really bad, please do not let yourself get stuck there.
That's a very powerful statement. And to anyone listening, if you are experiencing childhood abuse, reach out to a trusted friend, a trusted adult. Use the internet, any resources you have, and see what's available for you where you live. There are resources out there. And if you have any questions, you can always message us at notanotherdepressedteen@gmail.com, DM us on Instagram, visit our website, or check out everything that Lawrence has online. Are there other ways where people can see more advice from you, hear more about your story if they're interested?
All of my social media pages, so YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, are all Lawrence C. Empowers. The website, lawrencecharris.com. And if anyone listening to this who happens to be a school principal, you have an organization, you have a podcast, you can email me at lawrence@lawrencefierras.com. I am very easy to find. If you ever want to read one of my books, you can find those on Amazon under Lawrence C. Harris. Everything is my name.
I'll also link a lot of those contacts you just mentioned into the episode description for this podcast so people can find you. But yeah, it was so great to speak to you. I know this topic is very personal, and I really appreciate you making the time to talk with me and for sharing all of this with me and everyone else who's listening.
Thank you. I appreciate it too.
Thank you to everyone who's listening for taking the time out of your day to support our podcast. I hope you have a great day.